Welcome to the Waynesburg Effect. We've got an action-packed episode today. First, the panel dives into the Trump indictment, and we're bringing you the legal and political perspective on the drama. Then, we turn to Capitol Hill and the hearings over Tik Tok, what you need to know on the app's future in the U.S. We then will pivot and look at the recent train derailments nationwide and examine the situation. Lastly, we will finish with the recent decision by a Delaware judge to allow a lawsuit to go to trial against Fox News. All that coming up on the Waynesburg Effect. Trump has officially been indicted by a New York grand jury on 30 counts of business fraud. As we're filming this on Monday, he is en route to New York City to surrender to prosecutors. Understandably, there are all kinds of questions surrounding this, and perhaps the biggest is this. Is this politically motivated? That's why I wanted to ask my panel of Alex Hughes and Jason Polgar. Starting with you, Alex, what do you think?
I 100% believe that this is politically motivated. We've seen time and time again that the Democratic side has gone after former President Trump with so many different things, whether it was the Russian election hoax or the files that he had at Mar-a-Lago. We've seen so many things with them going after Trump, trying to figure out what they can do to get this guy down, try and beat him. And I think this is just another one of those things where they're trying once again to get Donald Trump any way they can. And again, 100% politically motivated in my eyes.
I will ask you the same question, Jason, but I suspect the answer might be a little bit the same.
Oh yeah, the answer is the same for me. I mean, it seems very much politically motivated, especially right when the election's starting up, right when his campaign's launching off the ground. It seems to me like an attempt to take him off the playing field. I don't think it's going to work, but it seems like a very baseless case when we consider Michael Cohen testifying by an attorney, not testifying, but he stated in his attorney that he didn't tell Trump about this and the payment at all, that this payment was done just by him without asking Trump. And then we have Stormy Daniels, her attorney, saying that there was never an affair at all.
That's a whole lot of different things that we need to dissect individually. So maybe cutting right to the baseline. Do you guys think that the hush money was actually paid to Stormy Daniels? Because we have the tax filings and it's been written as a business expense, but like that money, what do you think actually happened with that? Starting with you, Alex.
I personally, I'm going to say I think it's a business expense. At the same time, I'm not going to go out and say, oh, it's definitely not hush money paid to Stormy Daniels, because we've seen time and time again in the history of U.S. politics, presidents will go and do a lot of things they really shouldn't do. And again, it's not very morally correct, but at the same time, it's happened a lot in presidential history. Most famously, of course, John F. Kennedy was very famous for having affairs. So again, I'm not going to say that it definitely wasn't paid in hush money, but I don't think that it was.
And it's important to note that paying hush money isn't necessarily illegal. Where the charges are coming from is the misrepresentation and business fraud. So you kind of touched on this earlier, but do you think that Trump even had any idea this money was going out to Stormy Daniels, Jason?
I think extremely questionable. I think it could go either way. But if we have Michael Cohen's attorney saying a few years ago that it didn't, I don't think there's without a reasonable doubt that it happened. I would lean on the side that he didn't, that it was kept away from him. But I mean, I just think there's no conclusive evidence to point at one way or the other.
Right. I would expect that would be the basis of this trial, whether or not, if Trump did know and directed it. That's really where the entire thing hinges, because again, the hush money part really isn't the issue. It's the way it was misrepresented by the business and whether or not it was Michael Cohen doing something on his own. So, but there's one element to this that I do want to touch on, Alex. You said how there's been a lot of, attempts to maybe derail President Trump, whether or not they're legit or not. Those are all different examples. We're looking at this one. One thing about this, though, is that the charges have been brought by a grand jury. It's not just one person filing them. Do you think that changes it a little bit and makes them more credible?
I think it makes them a little bit more credible, but at the same time, I think that, again, you have to look at everything that's happened to Donald Trump throughout throughout his whole time that he's been involved in politics. They're always coming up with something. Again, I think it makes it a little bit more credible that it's not just one person, but at the same time, I don't buy into the credibility of it all that much at all.
One thing that's been talked about is how the district that this has been filed in is extremely liberal, so the jury that they would select, in all likelihood, could lean that way. Again, we don't know what the process was of selecting these people and how that played a role. But Jason, do you think that could potentially have played a role, or do you think that for the most part that jury was apolitical?
I don't think in that district there would be the possibility of having an apolitical trial. I mean, if you're having a trial of a former president who is known by pretty much everyone in this country in a very liberal district, I don't see the possibility of having a fair trial there. And the question would be, if you do it in any other district, how are you still going to have a fair trial that's not politically biased when our nation's so polarized right now?
And that's a great point, just how basically every district you put this in, people are going to have a strong way one way or the other, because Trump is just this extremely polarizing figure, and everyone wants to see a conclusion to this. But as some reports are saying, we won't know this for quite a while. Again, people are saying that Trump is expected to delay this, push it back, do whatever he can to delay the proceedings, even maybe into the campaign season. So Alex, what do you think of that strategy going forward? Do you think he will really just try to delay it, or do you think he's going to address it right off the bat?
I think he's probably going to try and delay it. That seems to be what most signs have been indicating and pointing towards, that he will delay it. I'm not sure how I feel about that, because I feel like if he feels like he can get out of it pretty quickly, I think it'd be in his best interest to just go for it, get it done and dealt with, and then move back on to the political campaigning. But at the same time, he is known to fight back, and delaying it, I think he would view that as kind of a fight back and a pushback from his perspective.
Do you think it would be a wise move, Jason, for him to try and delay it and push it back a little bit?
I think it would be a wise move. I mean, he's right at the start of his campaign right now. He needs time to be out on the trail and not be dealing with this case. So I think it would be the smartest thing for him to do right now. Plus, if you have the lawsuit still ongoing, still in the air, it provides him even more of a narrative to claim political persecution against him. It'll probably fuel support towards him in the election if it's still ongoing.
And that's one thing that we do have to highlight as we get close to the end of the segment, is the political implications. We've seen all kinds of things come out that, in theory, should have derailed Trump, and likely a decade ago would have derailed a presidential candidate, but it just hasn't happened yet. Alex, do you think this could be the one thing that really significantly impacts his chances as president?
I don't think so. I think, if anything, this honestly might help his case in the long run, because, again, political persecution, that's what we're looking at here. That's what a lot of people are thinking about it. So if he's taking that angle, I think it more so help him than even hurt him, because the people who don't like him aren't going to change their mind. But this might take some of those middle-leaning people who haven't made up their mind on who to vote for in the next election and be like, hey, they're going after this guy with all this stuff, and they're trying to just get him out. Why are they trying to get him out? Why don't they want him in? So they might sway a little more towards his side. And so I think, if anything, this is going to help him more in the long run than hurt him.
Jason, one thing that people have spoken about is how this may impact his standing with the Christian right, the moral majority types, those people that really feel strongly about that. Do you think that this has a possibility of hurting his chances with that group? And how do you think some of the other things that have come to light about Trump, do you think that is going to play into it?
It's a complicated sort of situation. I think with a lot of people on the moral majority Christian right, it won't affect it, because they're already convinced that all these attacks against him, all these trials in the past have been basically lies and aren't legitimate. But I do think there is a sizable amount of the Christian right that, while they do support Trump, while they would support him if he goes to the general election, they're not completely sold on his character. They might not vote for him in the primary. I think that will possibly affect him in the primary. I don't think it'll be big enough to have any major change on how this primary will play out.
So you don't think that could potentially boost DeSantis in the primary, is what you're saying?
I think it could be perhaps a minor boost, but I really don't think it'll be a major boost. I don't think it'll change the result either way.
I'll let you jump on that, Alex.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it may give him a little bit of a boost. Again, that's pretty much the main competition for him in that election is against DeSantis. But at the same time, I just feel like everything we've seen lately has been Trump rising a lot greater over DeSantis, and it seems like we're headed towards another Trump-Biden election. I think that, again, even though DeSantis that might help him pull a little bit closer, I think ultimately Trump will definitely edge out DeSantis, even with this going on.
Well, thank you both. When we come back, we'll take a look at the future of TikTok. Stay with us.
You're watching WCTV, where we aim to bring you the best local coverage of what you care about most. Everything from local businesses to hometown sports and the latest weather. We're keeping up to date with what you need to know about issues that affect our campus and our community. We're telling the stories that matter, celebrating our past, our future, and our potential. So tune in for all the latest buzz right here on WCTV Channel 14, Waynesburg.
TikTok continues to face heat from the United States government, and most of the focus lies in the company's relationship with China. TikTok CEO testified in front of Congress, and the Senate is considering a bill to restrict the company. The big question that is raised is this: will TikTok be banned in the United States? That's a question I want to ask my panel right now, starting with you, Jason. I mean, there has been so much talk about this honestly for years at this point. Do you think that we're on the path to TikTok being banned in the United States?
I mean, I'm up in the air on this question. I think that there's a likelihood that this does happen, but I mean, I think it would be an uphill battle to do it. But I think the establishment might be willing to do it this time.
Alex, this is just such a big question. I'll ask it to you as well. Do you think we're going to see TikTok being banned?
Like you said, we've seen them battling through this a lot lately in the last few years since it's really started to become as big a platform as it has. And again, as much as I hope or think that maybe it will finally get banned, at the same time, I'm not putting all my eggs in that basket, and I'm still a little bit on the fence about whether or not they'll go follow through and finish the job.
Well, I guess a follow-up question to that would be, if they don't ban it, what are some things you think the government will do to maybe sanction it or put some restrictions on it? Because we're already on the path. We're going to see some action taken against TikTok. What do you think that action will be?
Yeah, like you said, they have to figure out some kind of way to restrict exactly what China is getting from the platform. And I'm not exactly sure how they're going to do that. They're going to have to come up with some kind of algorithm or something in the works to make sure that they're not just, China isn't getting all that information. And not only that, but China have their way of the things that they've sent out and push on that platform, indoctrinating the people. And so they really have to monitor that along with the information going out. It's going to be, again, a tough thing to do, but I definitely feel like if it doesn't get banned, we're going to head for that alternative.
Well, I guess pivoting from the will it to the should it here, should TikTok be banned in the United States? Starting with you, Jason.
I don't think it should be, because we have American social media companies that are doing just about the same data collection for the U.S. government. The issue here isn't whether TikTok is doing data collection, it's that our establishment wants data collection to be done by our government, not by the Chinese government. And if it's also a censorship issue, our government does just as much censoring as the China would do. We just do it in more subtle ways. I think it would be a very horrible thing if TikTok were to get banned, just because it would provide for the U.S. government to have even more control over the digital landscape and free speech.
And I do think that is a defining point of this whole drama. It's being kind of obscured by maybe, national security principles or whatever, but there really is an information war going on between all the world governments, and that's just the age we're in, the internet age, where the battle to control the information is significant, and every government is trying to get a piece of this. So kind of going off that, Alex, do you think that it should be banned here in the United States?
I personally think that it should be banned, and you mentioned that a lot of the American social medias and sites are doing the same kind of thing with gathering that information on, but the difference is that's our government. We're supposed to trust them, and again, you can't trust them full-heartedly, obviously, but at the same time, China is, at this point in time, kind of an enemy of ours in the fact of with information and all that kind of thing. We're two of the biggest world powers in the world, so you don't want your rival, kind of like in the same way that the Soviets were back in the 1960s. You don't want that kind of rival gathering that information on you and your people.
I guess the follow-up question is, should you trust one government to have so much control over who gathers your data? Because part of this bill is there's a lot of restrictions on internet privacy and things of that nature. I guess my question to you is, what makes you think that it is trustworthy for one government to have the data over the other?
I feel like as far as that goes, it's just the fact that it is our own government that is really why we're supposed to just trust in them. And again, I'm not saying that I fully trust in the government, even though it's my country and my state and everything like that, but it's just a lot easier to trust in your own than somebody else's.
Jason, we are seeing rapid escalation against China. Again, at times it approaches perhaps a new Cold War. So what do you think of the argument where people say that, look, China is, whether you not like it or not, they are a threat to the U.S. hegemony across the globe. And do you think that the argument that we need to protect the American people and our national security from influences by China, do you think that's a good one?
I think it would be a good argument if our government wasn't doing so much to censor the web and to peer into our privacy, but our government is. I mean, at this point, the biggest domestic enemy to Americans is not the Chinese government, it's the American government. And that's why I don't think there's any legitimacy right now to banning it. Our government is just about as malicious, if not more, than the Chinese government towards us.
Can you elaborate on that last point a little bit?
Well, to elaborate, just look at this bill. This bill doesn't, like you mentioned, it doesn't just include a ban of TikTok, it includes a ban of VPNs, which would make it impossible for people to have privacy in their Wi-Fi networks. Their Wi-Fi networks would collect their web data and pass it on to the government if required. It also makes it so the federal government can peer into private communications, your private devices, and your accounts, and can do investigations into that without needing to go through Congress or the courts. We're going towards troubled waters, and the purpose of this bill definitely isn't for national security. It's just to keep the hold of the American government over the web space and for them to increase power. This is basically a new Patriot Act for the internet.
And we have seen over the past couple of years some more and more focus by Congress to try and restrict some of the internet freedoms and bring in more policing. To you, Alex, do you think there's a way that we can navigate this and find maybe a middle solution that, you know, it protects American interests and national security, but still preserves the freedoms of the American people?
Yeah, I certainly think that's probably where this should be intended to go. Maybe not getting through this whole bill, but just getting enough of it passed to where, again, your American people have maintained more of their privacies from you, but at the same time, just getting that away from, getting our information away from the opposite governments as well. I think the middle ground is exactly where this needs to head, and I think it's where it should head. I think it will head there.
Jason, do you think there's a way we can find maybe a middle in where we protect national security, but we also are considering, as we've spoken about, the interests of the American people?
What we do first is you don't go for this bill. We take this off the table, and what we do is we pass a digital Bill of Rights, and we ensure that the web space isn't censored, that Americans' data can't be violated in violation of the Fourth Amendment, and then and only then we pursue anything on TikTok. That is the only point at which I trust our government to do anything on TikTok. Before that point, they should do nothing. They shouldn't touch it at all.
There is one point that hasn't been touched on too much about this, but the concept of free enterprise and whether or not a foreign company should be able to operate independently within the American economy. Starting with you, Alex, do you think that, you know, the principles of free enterprise should apply to a foreign company?
Yeah, I think this one it's kind of a slippery slope. You know, again, China is at this stage pretty much an enemy per se of the United States of America, and so it really becomes tic-tacky whether or not you want to allow them to have all the same rights as you would give to one of your own American companies. So I think it's just a tough call to make, but ultimately I lean towards not allowing them to have those same policies and luxuries just because, again, it's based out of somewhere else. It's not us, and because of that, they're not going to have our best interests in their heads.
Jason, where do you fall on that issue?
I don't think we have any obligation to preserve free enterprise rights for foreign nations or foreign individuals that aren't citizens. While I don't trust our government to do anything at this time, I do think, you know, for example, the BlackRock situation kind of mirrors this. We have foreign countries increasing control over our country. So I don't think free enterprise plays as much into this situation as free speech would.
Well, thank you both. When we come back, we'll be talking about the train derailments across the country and what the federal government is doing or isn't doing to solve it. There have been several high-profile train derailments this year already, with the most notable one being the Norfolk Southern derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. Last week, a train derailed in Minnesota and caught fire as well. And on Sunday, a train went off the rails in Montana. I want to go to my panel and ask maybe just the biggest, most broad question that we have. What can we do to improve this? Because it seems to be escalating this year especially. Starting with you, Jason.
I think there needs to be greater oversight by the federal government. I don't think the laws need to tighten up, but it just seems like our federal government is definitely not on their top list of priorities right now. And I think it's really a shame when we care more about what's going on in Ukraine than these train derailments, or we care more about China. So I think there needs to be more attention paid and a bigger campaign to get a handle on this, especially when nuclear waste is being carried.
Yeah, Alex, this has been a very severe problem for a lot of communities around the area, around the country even. What do you think needs to be done about this? This is clearly an issue that's been presented. What needs to change?
Yeah, like Jason said, you really have to start paying more attention to what's going on here instead of overseas, because again, this is the most important thing for us here, is maintaining our own land in our own place. So they really need to put some more money and some more effort into making sure that this doesn't happen as often as it has, because 3 happening in this amount of time is just absolutely insane, because it shouldn't be happening that way. We should be able to solve this and help with it. And again, Joe Biden was able to muster up a visit over to Ukraine, but not to East Palestine. So they really need to start putting more of an emphasis on this and not on other things going on.
Over the past couple of years, we've seen infrastructure become more and more a pressing issue in American politics. Do you think that these derailments are one more symptom of a larger infrastructure problem that the U.S. is experiencing right now? Starting with you, Jason.
Yeah, I definitely think it is. I mean, they did pass an infrastructure bill in the Senate over the Biden administration, but it was mainly an environmental package. I don't see our infrastructure, especially in middle America, being taken care of. I mean, the roads obviously is a problem, but when you have trains and they're carrying nuclear waste, I mean, it's a big problem, and we need a real infrastructure bill to actually spend money on this instead of this wasteful spending that our Congress has been engaging in for as long as anyone can remember.
Alex, same to you. Is this part of a larger infrastructure issue that America is facing?
Absolutely. It all comes down to just being able to go and spend the money that they need to spend and fixing the problems that they need to fix right here in their own country, because you can't keep having these kind of incidents happening. You have to be able to solve that problem and stop them from happening anymore, because like these guys have said, the waste could potentially have some harmful effects on water, not just in the area that it's happened, but surrounding areas as well. So you have to be able to not have this happening all across the country.
During this entire saga, we've seen Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg really facing some heat over his role in this, or maybe his lack of a role in this. People have been really taking him to task for his response and the federal government's response to the situation, because again, he's the one who, for the most part, is in charge of this, and perhaps like the most attention the government's given to it isn't come from that part of the federal government. It's come from the DOJ. So starting with Jason again, what do you think that he needs to change to get more on top of this?
I mean, I think he needs to, get with the federal administration and actually pursue an infrastructure package. But I don't think the main role is with them. I think the main role is with FEMA, because if we're looking at the East Palestine derangement, they did a terrible job cleaning that up, basically allowed the nuclear waste to enter into the water. So I really think Department of Transportation needs to get with FEMA and figure out how to respond better to these and not to do a very lackluster job.
Alex, same question to you. What needs to happen?
They just have to start putting in focus and the time and effort that they need to solve this problem. And again, he is absolutely deserving of that criticism, because like you said, the lack thereof that he's taken into this, and he needs to just get some initiative to go out and try and solve this problem. He was put in the spot as Secretary of Transportation, so he needs to finally go out and do something instead of not doing pretty much anything at all to help the situation.
Well, thank you both. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about a lawsuit that was filed against Fox News. A judge has ruled that Dominion Voting Systems lawsuit against Fox News should go to trial. The lawsuit is based on claims that Fox News made about the accuracy and validity of Dominion's voting systems in the 2020 election, and the judge trying the case wrote that the evidence is, quote, crystal clear that none of the statements relating to Dominion about the 2020 election are true, end quote. Starting off with my panel here, I guess just the big main question everybody's asking is, what do you think of this move? Is it kind of, it's very striking that this is finally happening, but do you think it's right? We'll just start with you, Jason.
I think the case is a bit ridiculous. I mean, when the election broke and when the claims of fraud were being made, I mean, the only way you can say there was no reason to suspect it then was just by claims by authorities saying so, claims by Dominion, claims by election officials. And you had the social media companies, basically censoring anything, putting warnings regarding it. You can't warn against something that hasn't been proved to have not taken place to begin with. That's the nature of alleging something. So it's just ridiculous that you can sue a company like this, have a standing in court when, of course, nobody knew if it was true or not. But that's why, that's why people had to look into it.
Same question to you, Alex. What do you think of this?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the whole case is absolutely absurd. Just the fact that they're trying to take them to court just because they made claims that potentially this wasn't a fair conducted voting. And again, there was no physical proof other than what they were saying that, it was 100% legitimate. But it's our right to be able to criticize and question them whether or not it was the case. So again, I think that it's just completely absurd. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, and it's just a big waste of time here.
One point of the trial that's really interesting is all the text messages and emails that have been brought into this, that have been released to the public, and just how some of the people at Fox who were even saying things about Dominion possibly having a role in the election being rigged or whatnot, they didn't believe it themselves. And that's shown by messages sent from whether it's Tucker Carlson to executive staff at the network or things of that nature. Alex, do you think that with that bit of information, do you think that it's fair to call it a defamation when the people saying the things don't even believe the things that they're saying?
I mean, I feel like that is a fair argument, that they could be just trying to say that these guys are just trying to egg on to the people that are believing it, because again, there are a lot of far right people who do believe that, and so you could be saying that, they're just trying to sucker them in and get them going for that. But at the same time, I feel like it's just still a baseless thing that it's not really going to, I still don't think it's going to make it that far, but that is probably like the best claim that they have against this. But at the same time, I still don't see it as that big of a deal.
Jason, what do you think of the whole defamation argument?
I mean, I would believe that Fox News truly didn't believe it. I mean, I wouldn't trust Fox News at this point to, go anything that's, put anything above profit, really. So I really believe that they were probably trying to balance keeping their viewers in. The text messages show it. I would find it kind of an amusing thing if they did get dinged for that, but even in general would just be a dark day for America and for free speech if they were dinged for this, even though obviously I don't think they were pushing it originally for the right reasons and they did back off of it.
Well, thank you both. That's all the time that we have today. You can catch new episodes of The Waynesburg Effect at 5 on Wednesdays on WCTV Channel 14, and you can see all the previous episodes on YouTube at WCTV Waynesburg University. For my panel of Jason Polgar and Alex Hughes, thank you for joining us, and have a great night.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.